Hmm. Okay, Merry Christmas to one and all. Thank you very much, obviously, for tuning in. A lot to discuss that has happened over the last few days of sporting importance. Now, obviously, the Ashes series has not been a good start for the first two tests for England. 2-0 down. The series could be lost in the third test. It could be a whitewash. If it is a heavy Ashes defeat and we come away with not even a single test victory in the five test series, I honestly think Joe Root and the coaching staff and the selectors there needs to be massive change. If we can come from behind and win the next three, okay, that changes the conversation. If we can be competitive in the next three tests and maybe nick a test here or there, maybe a test win and a test draw, and at least go down fighting, that might be a positive outcome to a so far pretty diabolical test series. There is no hiding the fact that England have been, well, dreadful. Australia haven't been great. That's the scary thing. This Australian side isn't well beaters, and they are easily outplaying England with bat and ball. So there's that. The Boxing Day test is going ahead. There's still question marks over where the fifth test, where it will be played and all. In footballing discussion, the Premier League has had more meetings in regards to the festive schedule. The Premier League and the EFL have come out and said there's going to be no change to the festive schedule that's coming up from tomorrow on Boxing Day. But we're not sure how many games are going to get played, how many positive tests there are going to be, how many more postponements. I mean, Tottenham, Man United, Reading are the clubs that have had the most games postponed in the Premier League and the Football League. Other clubs are now having, Burnley have had games postponed for a variety of reasons, including weather. So they've been affected as well. It's getting to the point where there's going to be a lot of fixture congestion coming up. It's going to be very, very difficult to squeeze all these games in with the Nations League in the summer. Going ahead with the World Cup when it is this time next year. I think the final's been played this time next year with the fact that means next season starts earlier, means less of an off season and a more condensed pre-season. Uh, it means there's less weeks in the summer where players actually aren't eligible for international duty, where they're properly on a break. So the fixture congestion, it's going to become a bit of a headache. Hopefully the FA Cup, we could even see the FA Cup third round impacted. Um, there's a limit. I have some sympathy for the players, but when players like Grealish and Foden are out in nightclubs till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, it's not a good image to have when you're meant to be role models and when then you're complaining about virus outbreaks and playing squads being shut down because of COVID protocols. It undermines their argument of player welfare, um, which we've seen throughout the pandemic. Uh, I'm surprised with Chris Silverwood coming out and saying he wouldn't make any squad changes for the first two tests. That for me is a massive surprise. Not selecting Stuart Broad in the first test and going with a spinner was a head scratcher. Obviously, Jimmy Addison was ruled out of the first test, so obviously you're a bowler down from your squad. And then in the second test, bowling part-time spinners like Joe Root and David Milan made no sense to me. Yes, they took wickets, but it says that the main bowling attack isn't strong enough with depth-wise, and they're still heavily reliant on Broad and Anderson to get the bulk of the wickets, which, in my opinion, is a concern. Joe Root, if you look at his stats as England captain, and that's tests won, test lost, series won, drawn and lost. Actually, statistically, for win percentage, he is the worst England captain. Statistically, we're not talking about his batting average or how many wickets he's taken as a part-time bowler or anything like that. Statistically, he is the worst England captain. He gives Andy Gregg a run for his money as worst England captain, and Andy Gregg wasn't captain for very long. Flintoff wasn't captain for very long. Peterson wasn't captain for very, very long. Joe Root's been captain for quite a significant period of time since Alistair Cook's retirement. And yet you have to start asking questions about, is he the right person to be captain? Does he have the authority to be captain? Is Ben Stokes, for example, as vice captain, the right guy to be vice captain? Um, are they the right leadership group? Then you have to ask the question about the coaching and selectors as well. I think several things are at play here with the England Test side and Australia, for example, as well, with their issues off the field in recent years. Both these sides have had a lot of scandal off the field in the last 3, 4 years. There is no denying that. Let's not deny that. There is no getting away from, Sandpaper Gate, Michael Warner and some of the issues he's had on and off the field. Tim Payne and the sexting scandal from the Australian point of view. On the England point of view, the Yorkshire and Essex racism scandal, I think that has having a massive impact on the team right now. And a lot of the players are based in Essex and Yorkshire, and that has definitely got to have an impact on the team chemistry, how the team is playing, and the selectors as well. It's a long-standing issue with both these sides and not the teams they were in 2005. That's when I think Australia and England were the two best teams in the world, in my personal opinion. That's when they were at their peak. Was that 2005 Ashes series, which was literally down to the final test at the Oval and the final day at the Oval. Um, that was a lot of pendulum changes with momentum. I think that was the best cricket I've ever seen. And in my opinion, neither side is at that level, and hasn't been at that level for a very, very long time. The Australian team in the 90s was the best team in the world. There is no debating of how good that Australian team was in the 90s. With Warne, the War brothers, Brett Lee coming through, Shane Warne, Gilchrist behind the stumps, Gillespie as a secondary bowler to McGrath. It was a terrifying lineup. I'm not terrified by this Australian lineup as a cricket fan. It doesn't strike fear and terror into me. But this England lineup, again, I'm not sold on this England lineup. You take out Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson from the bowling attack, and that is a toothless bowling attack. And then you look at the batting lineup, and I think Joe Root, his numbers have dipped since he's been England captain. He's still got a decent batting average. You take Joe Root out of it. Stokes is too inconsistent. Neither Curran brother is in the squad. David Milan is there's too much inconsistency in the batting lineup, and the bowling lineup is weak, really weak. You take Anderson and Broad out of that, there's no one there who strikes fear into an opposition batsman if you're opening the bowling with the new ball. Nothing to me that says you're going to take your head off, which is what you want. You want to intimidate the opposition openers with the bounce and swing, and there's nothing in there after Broad and Anderson really that consistently would trouble over a 20 over spell, for my opinion, with Sam Curran not being there as a solid all rounder. There's nothing there that, for me, strikes fear into the batting lineup of the opposition. Personal opinion. The other bowlers either haven't hit that level yet because they're still developing, or they're not consistent enough at this level. So there's weakness across the board. The World Juniors, I'm going with Canada. It's a Canada-US final, and I'm going with the Canadians slightly edging it. That's again personal opinion on that one. It'll be close. It may go to overtime, but got to open a Christmas beer. Having a Warsteiner, yeah, that is good. I think Canada will just edge the US. I think it'll be a 2-1 or a 3-2. It's going to be a close game. May go to overtime, but they could both underperform and be knocked out before the final. But you're looking at junior level players. Junior level players haven't fully developed yet. They're still learning the game. They're still developing into their bodies. They're not the finished article. They haven't peaked yet. So, in my opinion, it's a lot of sports fans put too much pressure upon developing age grade players, even if they are playing, in top level competition, which some of them actually are. Too much pressure is put upon some of these first round draft picks in the NHL, for example, who go on to play at the World Juniors or even World Championships. Because a competition that's short, sharp, and sweet is nothing like a regular grind of an 82 game schedule, which is what you'll find in the AHL and the NHL, or I think it's about a 60 or 70 game regular season in the European leagues. A short, sharp tournament like the World Juniors or the World Championships or the Olympics is nothing compared to regular season grind. And that's something that a lot of fans, again, forget about. It's the best way a player who can develop their skills and their game and grow into the game and hit their ceiling, for example, or maximise their potential is you put them into a regular 82 game regular season grind, whether they make the playoffs or not. And if they do make the playoffs, that's a bonus for development because it's a different style of intensity and play. Until a player is playing regularly in the lineup at the top level or in the minors, even then, the minors is still pretty decent level hockey. World Juniors is a different kettle of fish. I think the Canadians, on prospects alone, look slightly stronger than the US, and we're talking, it's not a lot in it. It could go either way. Um, Honestly, it could go either way. But again, World Juniors, these are junior grade players. Some of them aren't even playing in major leagues in Europe. They're still playing in junior level, you know, in the Canadian and US developmental leagues. Some of them aren't even in the minor developmental leagues yet. It's very difficult to get a read on a player who's not playing senior level, even at AHL, ECHL level, because you've still got to do that regular season grind. You're playing against a veteran or playing with and against veteran professionals who are on conditioning stints or they're winding down their careers, but they know a lot about the game. They've developed their skill set. They know the little tricks of the trade, the little shortcuts, their physicality of the game. So, in my opinion, World Juniors, I don't put too much stock in the World Juniors. I like to see it when they're playing against, regular seasons in North American, European top leagues against men. That's when you can get a good judge on how they're developing as players. Um, Obviously, the goal is to play in the NHL and have a long decade and a half career, as an average. And not all of them will actually pan out to be NHL regulars or even AHL regulars. Some of them will flame out, won't even make it to the ECHL level. They will flame out. They'll have a couple of seasons, it won't work, and they'll give up the game after their entry level contract. So I don't read too much into the World Juniors. Some players develop at a slower pace than others. Some really have a quick development and then they peak earlier than others. So it's a crapshoot. And with the lack of game time some of them have had over the last 2 years, with the disruption to seasons, which will disrupt their development. Um, it's very difficult to get a read on prospects and draft picks and how they're developing and how they're playing. They may be playing well at one level. Excuse me. That step up may throw them off, or they may be middling in the minors, but they get an emergency call up to the NHL. It's like a water off duck's back, and they really get stuck in, and they don't look back, and they don't get waved back down again. It's a very hit and miss thing. And some players do develop. Some players are steals in the draft. They get drafted in the fourth, fifth round, sometimes the sixth or seventh round, and actually, like Pavel Datsyuk, end up being superstars. Others go undrafted and make it to the NHL the hard way, and others get drafted first, second round, and flame out very, very quickly. Yakupov, for example, but his attitude was more the issue rather than his skill level. But yeah, it's the World Juniors. I'm going to say Canada at a slight favourites, but it's very close. What happens with the Olympics is going to be interesting. What will the rosters be made up of? Because there's no NHL players going. Does that mean there's going to be no AHL players going like they did last time? Um, it's going to be interesting to see how those rosters are made up. Will it be mostly European-based players? At which point, it's advantage to the European nations. Who knows what's going to happen with the Olympics in 2 months' time? I think more athletes and nations be starting to pull out their athletes. This is something to consider with the Beijing Winter Olympics next February. I mean, look what happened with the Tokyo Summer Olympics was delayed by a year. The Euros delayed by a year. The Rugby League World Cup delayed by a year. We may see the Olympics get postponed. We could see more athlete pullouts. We've already seen diplomatic pullouts in the Olympics, so it's a watch this space with the Olympics. I just got a Tim Stutzler signed puck. That's worth something. And a 1980 Jim Craig. I haven't heard that name since I watched The Miracle on Ice a few years back. That is a fair bit of memorabilia. Christmas Day sports memory. It's more Boxing Day. Traditionally, in my family, I used to watch the Boxing Day Test match, or listen on Test match special for the cricket. Obviously, in the UK, the Boxing Day football fixture list is a big thing, the Boxing Day football. But for me, it was England, South Africa. I'm going to say, I think it was 2014, 2015. I think it was 2014. We were playing the Boxing Day test, which would have been either the second or third test in this test series against South Africa, being played in Cape Town. That was a fun day's play to watch. I watched the whole first ball till last ball. I watched the whole day's play of the first innings. I believe South Africa were batting first. That was kind of a thing. It was either listening to the cricket on Test Match Special or watching it on Sky Sports or listening to the football on Five Live Sports Extra. So listening on the football on the radio. It's just a thing. I also like the horse racing at Kempton Park, the King George VI chase, which I'll be watching tomorrow because I like the horse racing. So that's a very important horse race in the English, well, British horse racing calendar is the King George at Kempton, which is one of the big jump races, national hunt races of the year. Always try and watch that if I can every year. It's a big thing in my sporting calendar. Is the King George at Kempton, which I think was called off last year because of the COVID pandemic, but that's a big thing, at least for me. I do watch less horse racing now than what I did when I was younger. I was more of a horse racing fan in my teenage years. The rest of my family were bemused by my enjoyment of national hunt horse racing, which was over the jumps, not the flat. Very bemused, but that was a bit of a staple of my sporting calendar was the King George and the Grand National and the Cheltenham Festival in the jumps. Big thing on my sporting calendar. It's something that I stick by in my sporting calendar is the horse racing. So Easter time, Cheltenham Festival, Grand National Festival, and then the Kempton King George VI chase, and the associated races on Boxing Day, which is tomorrow. The NHL has announced that their shutdown is continuing an extra day till the 28th. It will be interesting if that gets extended again. They initially put the shutdown till the 27th. There's 140, 150 odd players on the protocol list. That's not including coaches and support staff. So it'll be interesting to see when the NHL decides to resume play. Hopefully, it's not too long. They're aiming to get the whole season finished on time. And of course, they have withdrawn from the Olympics. That's going to be interesting when it comes up to the next Winter Olympics, I believe, which is in Milan in 4 years' time. So the European market, I'm assuming they're going to go to that. They went to Turin in 2006. But it is interesting that the NHLPA, which had argued to go to the Olympics, has also basically voted not to go to the Olympics with an extraordinary general meeting last week. Part of the current CBA was that the players would go to the Olympics, so I cannot see them pulling out of the following Olympics. A lot of players are clearly disappointed, but with 19 to 20% of the playing group currently under protocols as of the shutdown, I can't see how that would be feasible with the current protocols in place that the Chinese government have and all that. So that is big news. Big news. Also, we'll have to see how many games in the football are postponed tomorrow in the English Premier League and the English Championship Football League. We know there's been a lot of discussion about player welfare, the fixture congestion, when these games are going to get played. I mean, highest number of positive reported cases since January, since they started doing regular COVID testing. Or it's the highest. January was the second highest. They've surpassed the previous record for positive lateral flow tests. It's getting complicated. I don't think we're going to have a footballing shutdown. If it was just the lower leagues that were affected, then they would shut it down. It's the TV money, the money talks. Fans have been left stranded at stadiums before Christmas, especially Burnley, Aston Villa. Fans from Burnley travelled down from Lancashire to Birmingham, got to the ground. Villa fans had turned up as well, both claret and blue, both fans of the Football League. You couldn't make this up. And the game was called off just about 2 hours before kick-off. So this is about lunchtime. Not a good look. Poor communication by the Premier League and the club, Villa. It reduced capacities have been put in place. You know, that also impacts things like the NHL with Canadian capacities reduced to 50% when if and when play resumes. That's been in place since before the shutdown, except in Montreal, where there's going to be zero capacity. Some of the Montreal home games may be moved to a location that has a reduced capacity. So that's a watch this space when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens and whether they're going to be playing games in Montreal or they're going to have to outsource them to another Canadian or US location until the Quebec regional government allows fans in attendance. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot that a lot of sports leagues have to discuss. It's really interesting, really interesting. You know, there's a lot of unanswered questions in regards to the current situation with the NHL. They've agreed to extend the shutdown by 24 hours. Uh, the statement being that they want to see what another batch of test results on players and support staff brings up because we know there's coaches in protocols, there's support staff in protocols, arena staff shortages, um, and when you've got nearly 20% of your playing group basically on the protocol list and growing daily, it creates problems for the AHL and the ECHL, the leagues below. I wouldn't be surprised if the NBA eventually has a similar problem. A lot of arena sharing there as well with the NBA and the NHL. Not in every location, but in most locations, an NBA team and an NHL team will share their arena. I'm surprised the NBA hasn't had similar issues at this point. Smaller squad sizes, though, but there will come a point where I think the NBA will also be impacted. Um, so we'll see how that plays out over the next month or so. Um, of course, in regards to Major League Baseball, no further talks have apparently taken place. There's deadlock between the league and the Players Association with Major League Baseball. And the longer that goes on, the more that could impact the preseason and regular season. So, again, with Major League Baseball, it's watch this space. And, in that regard, that's an interesting subplot on the background of what's going on with the NHL and the NBA. Major League Baseball's preseason starts when the NHL and NBA are still playing regular season and early playoff games. Uh, you know that in itself raises some questions in regards to when will they figure out a solution to their current situation. Um, Obviously, as things currently stand, um, there is you know no change at the moment. The lack of discussions is a concern. If I'm being honest, which you know is a worry. If we're breaking things down, it is a concern that there's been uh, a lack of dialogue between both sides. Um, we'll have to see how it all plays out with Major League Baseball and the Players Association. It's a difficult period because the longer it goes on, the more we could lose a whole season. I don't think Major League Baseball can afford that. In regards, it took the NHL a long time and a further lockout to solve their problems and get CBAs agreed and extended and agreements put in place. Major League Baseball, I think, could be struggling for a while if they can't solve their issues that have been clearly rumbling on for many years since you know 94, 95. They haven't fully resolved those problems. They've just kicked it down the road, kicked the can down the road, continued to give lip service, never actually solved the issues that the league faces. And therefore we end up in the position where we are, where the owners are still up to 48 hours before the CBA expired, signing players to ridiculous contracts. In my opinion, they knew they were going to lock out the players. They knew that this was going to happen. Um, the fact that both sides allowed the CBA to lapse is ridiculous in the 21st century. The arguments they were having last year in the resumption to play talks in the summer last year were ridiculous as well. When other leagues were shutting down, figuring out solutions, coming to compromises. Neither side really wanted to come to the table and compromise. It was a big surprise when they got the season restarted and had regular season and playoffs and the World Series. It wasn't looking likely until very late on in the summer. They dragged it out to the last minute. That is a concern. The other major leagues and other professional leagues in North America seem to have better labour league relations. They're not perfect. I wouldn't say any league is perfect in North America. I don't think any league's perfect when it comes to player um, team relations. When it comes to league owners and team owners and such like, there is going to be conflicts in certain areas, and for some reason, Major League Baseball is the only league that seems to have this issue so severely misjudged by both sides. Neither side is coming out of this with any popularity or brownie points, if I'm honest. And the only discussion point that either side has decided to put on the table is expanding the playoffs. And in my opinion, that doesn't solve the problems that the league has with between the haves and have-nots. There is a massive issue in regards to fixing fixing the issues that they are facing and will continue to face, in my opinion. I honestly think Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball's Players Association got things horribly wrong. Right, so there's already matches being cancelled tomorrow for the Boxing Day fixture list. I am very, very surprised that the EFL, the Premier League, the PFA, they're not having a mass meeting of all 92 clubs in the top four divisions. Very, very surprised for the statements coming out from the league, so the Premier League and the Football League, saying we're going to push ahead with a full festive schedule. I know there's going to be some bad weather as well. Heavy rains expected in the southern half of the UK that could possibly turn to snow, and the further north you go, it's going to be snow more likely than rain. Plus, you've got the rise in positive tests for COVID. The lower vaccination uptake within the professional footballing side of things, and some players have legitimate concerns, and that is fine. I think it's the role of the PFA to try and encourage as many of its members to get vaccinated. It is a voluntary scheme. There's no compulsory side of it, which I think is the right way to go. But the vaccine uptake is lower than the general population, which is concerning, and that's something that needs to be discussed. I think the vaccination of is around 60% to 68%. Either have had one or both doses. Very few have had booster jabs. And so, in that regard, that is a concern. The fixture congestion is a concern. There, from what I understand, as long as there is more games going ahead than cancellations, yeah, I think that will be the same. As long as more games are going ahead than have been cancelled on a match day, any given match day in all the leagues, then yes. As things currently stand, the Premier League as an isolated league had, I think, 6 out of the 10 games last weekend cancelled, which is 60%. As a whole, because of FA Cup and League Cup, and therefore, rescheduling games, not all the Championship, League One, and League Two play on any given weekend, which is fair enough. Again, minimum squad size has been 14 players. I mean, again, yes, as long as you have 14 players eligible to play, but then you have to ask the rules about the squad rule changes that have been introduced in recent years, where you limit the squad size, which I think is ridiculous. Squad sizes have been reduced since the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, 2009. Rules about squad sizes were changed. Um, and this is where you're having these cancellations that otherwise we've seen flu outbreaks with teams before where there's a bout of flu going through the dressing room. Admittedly, flu, depending on the strain, can be quite fatal. But we have seen issues where there's been a flu outbreak and they've still managed to play games. We've seen issues where there's been a food poisoning outbreak. They've still been able to play games. Um, it's it is a bit surprising that in the 21st century we are still having problems about squad depth. This shouldn't be a thing. There is enough money in the game to have bigger squads, but it's the rules that the FA, the Premier League, and the Football League have put in place. The Football League clubs have said, hang on a second, reducing our squad sizes with our regular season play, FA Cup, League Cup, FA Trophy, for example, it's not feasible. League One and League Two have said this is ridiculous, restricting us, and the Championship said reducing our squad sizes and capping them is ridiculous. We cannot have this. So they've already raised concerns in recent years about squad size changes and capping the limit of players on the books full time. It makes you wonder why they got rid of the reserves, really, because you're missing out on a player pool that can cover that position of an injured or sick player. Um, I think the FA have screwed this up. I think the Premier League and Football League have screwed it up. Um, you know, it, and also the transfer window opens next week. And of course, if you're signing a player from overseas, they've got a quarantine rules. You know, it is ridiculous. They've got to have visas on top of that, work visa. So if you sign a player at the beginning of January, you might not be able to play till the end of January with all the legal paperwork and quarantine rules and flow tests, lateral flow tests. So already, there is a problem. So the transfer market's going to be affected. I remember when Hull had a few years ago, only had 12 senior players fit and no goalkeeper and still played their first game. So I don't mean you call up the youth team. You call up the youth team because you've got rid of the reserves now. You know, reserve game fixtures used to be very, very important for match fitness. You would send a player down to train with or play with the reserves if they're coming back from injury or a suspension or a long layoff, and they'll play a couple of games in the reserves and then get called back up to the main match day squad. The reserves have gone, so now you've just got the senior squad and the under 21s and the under 18s, and that's a problem. You've lost the reserves, which would be another, full squad of players, another 14, 15 players, 16 players in the reserves with a couple of youth players getting rotated in both squads to fill, get game time and fill positions for like FA Cup games, midweek games, European games, League Cup games. You would bring up a couple of youth players, rotate the reserves around, bring a few reserves up to your senior first team squad, drop a few first team squad players down, give them a bit of a rest. You don't have that option anymore. And again, that's on the FA. That's to do with the financial rules. And part of the problem is the players are overpaid. So everything that is wrong with football is actually exacerbating the situation that football finds itself in right now, with games being cancelled because not enough players are available or there's an illness outbreak, in this case COVID. Um, and yeah, that is a massive problem. And when you've got clubs like Derby, who only had 8 players on the books before the first game of the season, days before, yes, there's financial implications with Derby, with the ownership side of things. But that raises a lot of questions about the rules in place, about financial fair play, squad depth, getting rid of the reserves competition, which used to be actually very, very important and used to attract, 20% capacity crowds at all levels. Um, and it does raise a few headaches. Look at Dover Athletic last season; they couldn't complete their regular season. They had so many games cancelled, and this is the problem with which the Football League could face is a Dover Athletic situation, which they will not allow because of the TV money. They will not be allowed at all. And so, therefore, what do you do? Do you recall all your players who are out on loan? Or that if the Premier League clubs were to recall their players online in the Championship, League One and League Two, and technically the National League, that creates a problem. Then the Championship clubs will do the same. Then League One will do the same. Then League Two will do the same. Then the non-league will start doing the same. And then you create a problem where there are going to be some teams short of players, and they can recall them at any time. technically under the loan system, you can actually recall a player at any time, or you used to be able to. I don't know about now. So football's got itself into a situation that is of its own making by rule changes in the past. COVID has exacerbated those rule changes and shows the flaws within the rule changes that have been put in place to save money. They're money saving techniques. In order for clubs to be under financial fair play, they've had to either reduce their squad size but overpay players, or reduce their players' wages and signing less quality players, and so therefore being less effective on the field. It gives a club a choice: bigger squad, less talent, or a smaller squad with more talent but less depth, and therefore doesn't matter either way. Can't fulfil fixtures, or you won't be getting promotion, or you'll be battling relegation. That's pretty much what clubs have to balance up now. The money rules, the financial fair play rules, are actually causing part of the impact. Is what we're seeing now, where games can't be played because you've run out of senior players. Changes to the reserve system and squad sizes is having an impact. I think there's going to come a point where not where they're going to have to look at the vaccination uptake, um, the protocols that are currently in place, and actually starting to fine clubs and players for breaching them. That's the only way I think we're going to see real changes, if the fines are serious and clubs get punished. And when clubs start getting punished, then I think the players will start taking notice. Is when they're getting punished, the clubs are getting punished. I think that might start changing attitudes, because while there is low uptake or lower uptake of the vaccination scheme, and we do know this new current variant of the virus is less dangerous, there will still be those who get unwell. And yes, football players do have families. They do have relatives who may have underlying health issues. They do have kids. You know, they do have lives away from the sport. What I find interesting is other sports are having less of an issue with the pandemic than football. Rugby union has been impacted. Let's remember that. 4 teams were stuck out in South Africa about a month ago and were forced to quarantine. So football is not unique, but for some reason, football has a lower vaccine uptake than other professional and semi-professional sports. It's across the board. It doesn't matter if it's in Europe or it's here. Although some European countries are making the vaccine compulsory, which then creates a different political kettle of fish, and other social discussions, which we could have on the other channel. But I don't know the best way to approach it on the other channel. I could give it a go, but I think my views on anti-vaxxers, and I can understand why some people are vaccination are hesitant about this new vaccine. I completely understand. There are some people have had a very negative reaction. I think the media has got a part to play in this. The media are slagging off these football players, saying there's a low vaccination uptake, yet they're spinning these stories of the horror stories of blood clots in the AstraZeneca vaccine, which has reduced uptake in certain parts of the world. Can't have it both ways. So the media has a massive part to play in the current vaccination uptake of players. I think the PFA have been poor in this regard. And I'm not holding any punches with the PFA. I think they've been a very poor organisation throughout the entire pandemic. The PFA. I've been highly critical of the PFA last year when they were just advising players not to take voluntary pay cuts or wage deferrals. I felt that was not reading the room properly. It didn't cover the PFA in a lot of glory. It was up to the individual playing squads and clubs to come to agreements, which was shambolic. And that was across the board. That was in Spain and Germany and France and all over Europe as well. So it wasn't just an England football problem. It wasn't. And I don't know what the ticket prices are to go to games, but I would tell you now, I think they're going to be higher now than what they were pre-pandemic. I think the FA Cup first and second rounds will tell you there was a lot of empty seats at games. Partly the weather had something to do with that, but I think ticket price. I think clubs have been forced to raise their ticket price above inflation. That would be my viewpoint on that. There's a lot of empty seats at the games I've watched in the FA Cup first and second rounds this season. I'm not going to deny that. I've Tried to keep it out of my match reviews, but I have noticed a lot of empty seats, which is troubling. Um, Now, £35 a watch. That's not bad for a championship club. That used to be a Premier League ticket 10 years ago. So work out the inflation on ticket price. It used to be about £35 to watch a Blackburn game. I remember when we were in the Premier League. Very affordable Premier League club to go watch back in the day. But eh, the 12:30 kickoff, Borough against Bournemouth, I think sums up how out of touch football is when it comes to its fixturing. That should not be a lunchtime kickoff. That should be a 3 o'clock kickoff, just for the away fans travel. If that was Middlesbrough playing Sunderland or Hartlepool in an FA Cup game, and you've given them a lunchtime, or Hull in a league game, I can understand that being the 12:30, 1 o'clock kickoff. Completely understand that. Um, but I wouldn't have that with the away fans coming from the southwest of England. That is a ridiculous kickoff time. Um, if, for example, Middlesbrough were playing, let's say Sunderland or Hartlepool or Hull or Newcastle in one of the cup competitions or in the league, perfect kickoff time, no problem with that. When you've got a club like Bournemouth or Exeter or Bristol City or Bristol Rovers or a team from the southwest making the journey to the northeast, that is an irresponsible kickoff time, and that's down to the Football League TV money. Borough Bournemouth is a big game in the Championship because they're both in the top half of the table. Changing kickoff times for TV. This is where fans get annoyed. This is where fans get annoyed. And of course, Merry Christmas to everyone who's joined the live stream. Should have said that. I'm already on my second crate of beer. I've already survived Christmas dinner with my stepdad, my mum, and my brother. Nearly punched my brother. We're doing well. We've already had our first drunken argument of the day, and now we're doing a live stream where there's going to be a difference of opinion about a whole variety of things in regards to um, the situation. But yes, the Bournemouth Borough 12:30 kickoff, in my opinion, was ridiculous. I have a lot of sympathy for the Borough fans. Fair play to them holding up that banner, in regards to the lunchtime kickoff, because they know the Bournemouth fans have definitely made a trek to get up there. Doesn't matter what league you're in, doesn't matter what competition it is, that is a ridiculous kickoff time. If you've got to look at the geographical locations of the teams, that makes no logical sense to have that as a lunchtime kickoff on a Saturday, in with bad weather on a Saturday in December. That is a ridiculous kickoff time. To expect Bournemouth fans to go up on the Friday night. I mean, you would have to still leave. You would have to leave work early if your boss is going to give you the time off work. You still have to make your transport up on a Friday night when there's engineering works on the trains. I think that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Especially, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like Carlisle going out of Bristol Rovers or Exeter City, for example, or vice versa. A lunchtime kickoff in that fixture, again, would be ridiculous. That is completely out of order, and that is on the EFL, that is on the FA, that is on the TV companies. They want to have that as the lunchtime kickoff to show on TV. Yeah, both clubs doing well in the Championship, but that is a ridiculous kickoff time. We were seeing it in the Premier League era with both those clubs. We've seen it now, obviously, in the Championship. That is ridiculous. If that was Bournemouth versus Southampton or Bournemouth versus Exeter or one of their local rivals, I could understand having the earlier kickoff, reduce drinking before the game, keep the troublemakers, away, ease of policing. That is ridiculous, however. I have no sympathy for the Football League in that one. Every sympathy for the travelling away fans. And to be fair, home fans as well. Home fans I've got a lot of sympathy for as well. And people wonder why there are empty seats at grounds. Partly it's ticket price, and partly it's kickoff time. Evening kickoff on a Friday night. I don't get that. The evening kickoff on a Friday night, again, is another one I cannot stand. You know, But of course, we've got the 3 p.m. TV blackout since '92 to protect attendance. That does nothing to protect attendance. Make sure as many fans as possible. That does nothing for attendance. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm sorry, that does nothing to protect attendance at the game. We saw it in the FA Cup as well with like Ipswich versus Barrow. Very few Ipswich fans were brave enough. Admittedly, Ipswich were shocking on the night, but again, Suffolk to Cumbria. That's still a fair trek to make on a Monday or Tuesday night. I think it was a midweek cup game replay. That is still a fair trek to make. Now it doesn't matter, it's a cup competition or league competition. Doesn't matter. Again, I wouldn't have a 9 a.m. kickoff for Millwall West Ham, but I wouldn't have an evening kickoff on a Friday that I've done in the past. The last time I played in the League Cup was an evening kickoff. That was a disaster. But I wouldn't have it as a 9 a.m. kickoff either, because then, you know, uh, yeah, I might look. The festive period, big money for TV because I know most fans are going to be at home. And you've got to look at the fixturing. It's more local rivalries on the Boxing Day and New Year's Day fixtures. You'll notice a lot of the games played in the festive period, geographical location does come into it. But again, it's to do with the TV money. Because they're classed as national holidays, 3 p.m. blackout doesn't technically apply. They can get around that because it's a public holiday. There's less public transport to get to ground, so the attendance will generally be less anyway. But again, I still, yes, several. It depends how loyal you are, and people plan around. A lot of people have Boxing Day off, but a lot of people, yeah, want to spend it with family, and you watch it on the TV. It's a traditional thing in a lot of households. I completely understand that, and I accept that viewpoint and that take on it. But again, public transport is limited. The weather can be, as we've seen, pretty crap. Um, and then you got to look at Birmingham playing Fulham over the Christmas period. That's ridiculous. It doesn't matter if the game was cancelled; it's still ridiculous. It's still, well, it's not the worst away day. It's not like your Carlisle playing Leyton Orient, which is a fixture. But the principle applies. It's not a local Birmingham City playing Coventry, which is doable. Or Walsall playing. I don't know who would Walsall be playing, or I can't think of who Walsall would be playing against. But the principle applies. West Brom Birmingham. The stadiums are very close together. Or West Brom playing Aston Villa. You can understand where I'm getting from here. I would if I was fixturing that for the Boxing Day, it would be West Brom Birmingham City if they're in the same league, or if Birmingham City, let's say Birmingham City slipped down the divisional two, Birmingham City, Walsall, or Wolverhampton, or whatever it may be, or Coventry City. You've got to look at the geographical location of clubs. To say to Birmingham City you're having an away day in London on Boxing Day, which is a Sunday, engineering works, bad weather, highly likely. Oh, guess what? Having bad weather and engineering works. There's staff shortages on cross country trains. How the hell are fans going to get there? Because you've got the low emission zone in London now, which not many Brummies would be familiar with. Do I think the majority of players will be, well, traditionally until I think was it 1962 or 63? It was Christmas Day rather than Boxing Day that the games used to be played on. And it was a tradition, and it changed to Boxing Day. Well, I don't know the full reason behind it, but it's still over the festive period, let's be honest. And it is what it is. I I do have a bit of sympathy for fans and players and coaches for this festive period, because you've got to prepare like 4 or 5 games in just over a week. And people go, "Oh, football, it's not the most physically demanding sport." Not on contact, but on miles and kilometres that the players cover. You look at their tacos; they have these little, trackers in their jersey. You may see a little lump at the back of the collar. That's a tracker. It tracks how far they move around the pitch. Some players will do 15 to 20 kilometres in a game, and you imagine doing that 4 or 5 times in a very short space of time. Plus, you've got to have training in there. That's a lot of wear and tear on the body, and this is where clubs get a lot of injuries and a lot of depth issues. And this is before sickness, and then you've got to factor in In a normal year, this is flu season. This is winter cold season. So there'll be players who've got niggling injuries who are also not 100% because they got flu or a cold. And then, then you put COVID into the mix. Voila, you've got a perfect storm. So yes, in my opinion, player welfare at this time of year is a headache. Fixturing is a headache, and then you've got the FA Cup third round in the first week of January, which is only a couple of weeks away, only 2 or 3 weeks away. On top of the fixture congestion in the Christmas New Year period, and you wonder why managers, various clubs are pulling their hair out, and you cannot argue with their argument. And people go, "Oh, but they argue every year." But the club owners want to make as much money as possible. And I think there's going to come a point where there's been rumours that the PFA might go on strike. Now, no, it's not. It's a British ice hockey jumper. It's a British one. It's a Bracknell Bees jumper. It's my ugly Christmas jumper. The one this year is hideous. Makes this look beautiful. And I think the more hideous they are, the more fun they are. So I've gone with my Bracknell Bees 20. I think it's 2018. I think it's the 2018, maybe 27. I think is it 2018 or 2017. I'm gonna have to check the year on this. I think it's 2018 Christmas jumper. I've got all my jerseys, so I'll be able to work out which year it is because they rebranded. They've rebranded again. But this is my Christmas one. The Halloween one is quite good as well. That's one I've got to get my hands on. And then the Armed Forces one is quite good as well. I've got a charity one, so I can work out which season it is by the logo. Best way to work it out. But it's my hideous Christmas jumper. It's actually not actually that bad. I actually like the striping on this one. It's not that bad. It's not as bad as some that I've seen dished out. I think more ice hockey does it very well at Christmas and at Halloween and on various armed forces days and charity rounds. They do it very, very well. Other sports I think could learn something from ice hockey. Even if it's match worn or just fan jerseys, I think, or warm up jerseys, I think other sports could learn something from ice hockey when they do these crazy jerseys. It's mostly for the kids, but they are a good laugh. They are actually pretty decent tongue in cheek taste. Some of them are absolutely vilely ugly, but at the same time, the uglier they are, the more cult classic they become. And you've got to see some of them. Some of them are absolutely hideous, but I like the fact the uglier they are, the more collectible they become. And this is one of only 22 ever made. So I've got one of 22. I've seen Star Wars ones. I've seen charity ones. I've seen limited edition ones because of an ex-player or an ex-fan has passed away. So I've seen quite a few really, really, really hideous over the years, but I like them because they are so ugly. They are collectible, and this is one of only 22. So, and it's a match one. So again, this was what they call a blood jersey. So if a player gets injured in the game, they have to change jersey if there's any blood. Because it's a spare one that's meant for the fans, there's no fight strap. But it is a really, it's my favourite jersey because it's actually the most comfortable one to wear. I've got a couple of other match jerseys as well, and some of them do have battle damage. One of them I can't get the blood stains out. You can see where there's. Have I been? I've been drinking Warsteiner and what else? And San Miguel. I'm on the second crate. Me and my brother. My brother's already had a full bottle of wine, a rum and coke. I think he's on his second rum and coke when I left, and he's had half a crate of beer. So my brother's pretty drunk. My brother was drinking before I turned up. He was still smashed from the night before because that's what younger brothers do. We nearly got in a punch up as well, which is quite funny. I nearly knocked. He goes, "Oh no!" And I nearly knocked him out. In the middle of a little play fight in the garden, I nearly knocked him out as well, and he wasn't so keen on that. But I don't really. This is the only time of year I really drink. I don't really. I don't really drink. Um, Plus, it gets me really gassy as well. But I drink spirits if I can, and my brother doesn't drink spirits, so really, so no, he's not really a football fan. He's not a football fan at all. He's not really a football fan as per se, which I find interesting. But he did watch the Champions League final and then the Euros final in a pub in West London, and he was got up to some antics in the summer when I was laid up in bed, pretty much paralysed with after a motorcycle accident. So he got up some drinking antics in West London during the summer, but I didn't. And he's not a Burnley fan. He's not a Burnley fan. He doesn't do. His dad, my stepdad, is a Liverpool fan, which is interesting. My mum has a history of marrying people who support Liverpool. It's weird. My dad was a Liverpool fan. Her current husband's a Liverpool fan. You couldn't make that up. It's weird. It has to be a genetic thing. Really does. Don't. Has to be genetic. But it is what it is. But I do like that quite. He must be a Burnley fan. My brother doesn't knows sod all about football. He's even admitted I don't really follow football, and that's fine. But the ironic thing is, he knows who football players are and all that, and he knows the history of the sport. He just has no interest in it, and that's fine. I'm not expecting everyone to be a football fan or a rugby league fan or an ice hockey fan. I mean, I've taken him to an ice hockey match, which is interesting. The chances are quite high for a global club of bandwagon fans. Yeah, there is that. The thing is, my dad's family on his dad's side were originally from Liverpool and Ireland, and there's obviously a connection there. My mum's family, don't know why my granddad supported Burnley. They're from the Midlands and the South East and London. Um, my dad's mother's side are from Dorset, Somerset area, and of course, that's where the Oval fandom comes in. But it is interesting. It's very, very interesting. But my dad's family, I can understand the Liverpool connection. My mum's family, I can't understand the Burnley connection. But it is what it is. But ironically, my grandfather's family came from the Midlands, like Wolverhampton, Walsall area. I'm surprised that we weren't Wolves fans or Walsall fans, if I'm honest. That is what's again really striking. Um, but yeah, Liverpool, global brand, absolutely. And that's where you get the bandwagon or the glory hunter fans. You find it with Chelsea, you find it with Man United, you find it with Arsenal, you find it with Liverpool, Man City. And ironically, that does actually aggravate the local fan base. You'll be surprised how many local fans of these clubs get very, very aggravated with the non-local fans. And I'm not a local to Blackburn, but I'm a Blackburn fan. I have been since before the Premier League's victory and all that. It's because I watched them on TV as a kid. Ironically, playing Liverpool, my dad's team, on the TV on Sky Sports, first season of the Premier League. And this is before we won the league title and all that. And I was like 2, 3 years old, and I just liked the colours, and I had no idea where Blackburn was in the geographical world. I was knee high to a grasshopper, and their colours stuck with me. And then I got into the club and understood the history and researched the history, and even as a young kid, I was aware we'd won the FA Cup 5 times, and I was aware of being founders of the Football League, and I was aware of the history of the team going back to the 1870s. Not a lot of football fans are truly aware of the history of and the foundations and the backstory to their clubs. They're really not, and that's what gets me. A lot of modern day football fans don't realise there was football before 1992. Yeah, if Tranmere were, yeah, I think Everton actually probably would have been the biggest club in Liverpool. They've got the more success. But yeah, if Tranmere had done what Liverpool and Everton had done, absolutely, it would be Birkenhead would be the centre of the northwest, or say Bolton were more successful. It'd be Bolton rather than Man City, Man United in the Greater Manchester area. I do think yes, the early modern footballing era, so the '60s onwards, that's where a lot of fans like today get their fandom from. The rise of the European Cup, the UEFA Cup, the old Cup Winners' Cup, the old Intertoto Cup, um, it does have an impact. That is still being felt years after these competitions have been rebranded, mothballed, whatever you look at it. It does have an impact. And, you know, it's the same with the original six in the NHL. They have bigger fan bases because they are the older, more successful historically of the teams in the NHL. Um, and yeah, if you're looking at the Australia, if you're an expat, yeah, the big four, the big six was seen as an outcast otherwise, and that in itself is interesting because that's what the media portrays to the overseas public is these are the clubs that are the fashionable clubs and every other club doesn't really matter, and that is a load of BS. Load of BS. If you were to properly educate the overseas fan about the history of the sport, they suddenly they look at you in surprise because a lot of them would have only really started following English football post 1992. The hardcore fans would have obviously watched the FA Cup, would have watched Wimbledon and Coventry win in the 80s, would have watched Ipswich in the late 70s, early 80s, and Norwich, Nottingham Forest, and all that do really, really well, or Oxford United winning the League Cup in 1990. So you would have the hardcore fans would understand that these other regional clubs have won silverware. But because of the Murdoch media in Australia and over in the US, it's the big four and the big six. They don't really encompass the whole football league and non-league pyramid. Someone supported Reading in a pub in Australia. Jesus, they're brave. Yeah, fans get everywhere. I know a handful of Blackburn fans from the south of England like me. We are a handful. We're not many. We are rare. We are a rare breed outside of southeast Lancashire. Um, and when I was at school, one of my friends was a Man City fan. When Man City were not really doing very well at the time, they weren't doing very well, and he was the only Man City fan in the school. I was the only Blackburn fan in the school, but I wasn't seen as the oddball. He was because his club wasn't very successful. It was very what? Who are you? Um, but the fact Reading is I live what about 3-4 miles from Reading's training ground and about 8 miles from the stadium, and I work around the area. So yes, there's a lot of Reading fans around it, but I've also seen people with their cars. I've seen Wolves. I've seen ice hockey fans from the north of England who support the Sheffield Steelers, the Nottingham Panthers, the Manchester Storm. Because if you follow the English ice hockey, that tells you something. When you've got fans from up north down here with their banners on their cars and all that, and that's quite striking. But a Reading fan outside of the Thames Valley is really rare. They've only had a couple of seasons in the I think 3 seasons in the Premier League in their history. No trophies. Majority of their existence in the lower divisions. That is exceptionally rare. Exceptionally rare. Uh, you know, Most of their existence has been played in the lower divisions below the Championship. That's exceptionally rare. Exceptionally rare. I live in Middlesbrough. The majority support Middlesbrough. You do get a few Liverpool and Man United. Well, they're the global brands, really. There's that is the global fandom of those two clubs because of the success they've had in the modern era from the 60s Busby Babes in the late 50s, and then the 60s with Liverpool and Man United, and then the 70s and 80s with Liverpool, and the 90s and the noughties with Man United. They've been the dominant clubs for a very, very long time. Um, for me, my next door neighbour is a Stockport County fan, but he is from Manchester, so his second team is Man United. If you know, but traditionally he's a Stockport fan. You know, that is. I mean, it's an odd one. I mean, my mate Sam is a Chelsea fan, uh, but we live in the Thames Valley, so again, it's we're in the catchment area of the big clubs from London. And down the road, we got Swindon as well, and they've been in the Premier League in their history, which is something I'm going to do a history video on the Premier League, the founding of the Premier League in '92. Um, and yeah, so I've seen all sorts of jerseys. I've come across Aberdeen fans in London. Certain clubs do have that outreach where you have a diaspora of fans around not just the country but around the world. And you will get expats who've moved from the UK to Australia or South Africa or New Zealand or the US or Canada who will take their fandom of their club with them. And so, yeah, there are fans of clubs throughout the football pyramid overseas. Um, and that in itself is interesting. Very, very interesting. You know, in my opinion, things was like clubs like Stockport County, Oldham Athletic, Swindon Town, Scunthorpe United. They all have played at higher levels. Oldham and Swindon have been in the Premier League. Sunderland is another one, Portsmouth, and they've hit hard times. And most of those hard times have been in the last 30 years. So since 1992. And this is something that needs to be discussed: is the amount of these clubs that are getting into financial difficulty, going into administration, having financial problems. Most of it has been since 1992. The last club to get kicked out of the Football League for financial reasons before Bury was the original Accrington, who were replaced by Oxford United. But, I look at it and Nottingham Forest, you know, winning the European Cup twice. I mean, the first club to win what is now the Champions League, to play in the third division of their domestic league system, because they hit hard times. Leeds United. I mean, Blackburn were doing really well in the Championship this season. We've had a good run of form over the festive period. We are really doing well. How long have we been outside the Premier League? We ended up in League One at one point. We're the first Premier League winners to end up in League One. So, Leicester City have been down in the lower division. It is worrying that since 1992, there is definitely a trend with more clubs getting into financial difficulty, overspending, poor ownership, bad management, bad transfer policy, and ending up in the situation wherein Aldershot and Maidstone have had financial difficulties. They weren't necessarily kicked out. They ended up having points deductions and getting relegated. I think they weren't fully booted. They had to reform. However, Aldershot has reformed like twice. Maidstone have had their difficulties as well. Again, I think they didn't get kicked out. I think they got relegated because of points deductions and had to reform. But I'll have to double check on that. But I know Accrington Stanley were the last club that I know of that definitely folded mid-season, were thrown out and replaced by Oxford United. No, Rushden Diamonds have got relegated out of League Two, ended up in the non-league and went bust. They weren't kicked out. They folded. Chester City, Hereford United. What other ones? There's been others. Gretna in Scotland's one. Rushden and Diamonds, I think, got relegated out of the Football League and ended up going bust. I think Darlington were another one that ended up going bust as well. Scarborough, I think, was another one that's had financial difficulties that were in the Football League. Carnarvon were a Football League club at one point. There's been quite a few but I think the last ones to actually get fully expelled, other than Bury, were the original Accrington or the second iteration of Accrington. So hence why Accrington Stanley are now being formed. That was in the 60s. Every other club that have been mentioned, I think, had points deductions, were relegated because of those points deductions because they obviously didn't have enough points, and ending up, original Scarborough, their old stadium's gone. They again got relegated out of the Football League via points deduction, I believe. Ended up in the non-league and couldn't financially survive with the lack of, gate receipts and loss of revenue, and same with Hereford, same with Chester. There's a few others as well. There's quite a few others. Bury's the latest and the most famous because they obviously were in the third tier, won their division at a cancer, couldn't start the following season, and then were expelled. So there are a whole host of clubs that have been relegated out of the Football League that have gone bust, and that is something that again needs to be discussed. I mean, Rushden and Diamond shouldn't have happened. Bury shouldn't have happened. Maidstone, Aldershot's had constant financial issues in the last 20, 30 years, but they've always got relegated out of the Football League, and then they've been wound up and reformed. Farnborough Town, a whole host. The list goes on and on and on and on. It's not. Yeah, they again relegated out. Then they got wound up, so they weren't kicked out. They got relegated out of the Football League. Torquay's another one that's had money problems, can't get back in the Football League. Just Notts County, they're struggling at the moment. They can't get back in the Football League. Luton took a few years to get back in the Football League. Yeovil plummeted out the divisions. Just doing decently in the non-league, in the National League. They obviously want to get back to the Football League, but that's going to take another season or two, I believe, at the earliest. They've been reformed, but what was Macclesfield Town's been wound up, but they have been reformed. So they, I think, will survive. Some will buy the rights, and it'll be Macclesfield FC or something. But yeah, Macclesfield, Mansfield were another one that was struggling. Chesterfield had issues. There's the list goes on. The list goes on. It's ridiculous. The same can be said in Scotland. Gretna is obviously the most famous, most recent example with Rangers that 2008 season, and 2000. I think Rangers was 2012. That's something again, and all this is in the last 30 years. So there are problems ongoing with the finances and ownership of football and the way the money is distributed. Fit and proper persons test, a whole host of issues that in the last 30 years have been made worse with the state of play, the wage inflation, the TV deal, whole host of issues. And it's not one particular club or one particular problem, but the same, financial difficulty. It's not new issues. It's just old issue. All these clubs have different problems, but they've all had money problems in the last 30 years. That's not to say that these issues were not avoidable. A lot of them were. It's bad. It's bad ownership. It's bad financial management or mismanagement. Whole host of issues to discuss. Oh, I've got a snotty nose. I get this when I get a drink and eat hot food. You could say yes, Scarborough got relegated because of the goal, but they were relegated before they collapsed. Rushden Diamonds were relegated before they collapsed, but the issues are there. Derby County are currently doing a Bury. Will Derby County be able to finish the season? And that is a question that needs to be asked. Will Derby County survive? Will they get through this season at least? And then if they go bust in the off-season, that's a different kettle of fish. Will they get through this season? How will that affect the championship? They've had 2 points deductions. How does that impact the rest of there's been La Hoho in France and Italy, but that's not the English Football League, that's the French league, that's the Italian league. We can discuss, clubs going bust in France and Italy, and uh, yeah, no, 1860 Munich aren't the side that they were. Same with St. Pauli and Hamburg, SV Hamburg. You know, there are clubs in Germany that have also struggled, but the fans had the 50%, 50+1 rule. Um, Therefore, the fans had more say. Like Dynamo Dresden nearly went bust during COVID. Um, and they've got a solid fan base for a club in the lower levels. Their fan base is huge. The whole city buys into Dynamo Dresden. It's you don't see any Bayern Munich or Dortmund fans walking around Dresden because you'll have your head kicked in. Um, the city buys into Dynamo Dresden. They almost went bust. The fans saved them. Each league has its own problems. France and Italy, yeah, clubs are very unstable. Very, very unstable. Um, it's a very difficult one. Um, because I only see a club like Derby their bust when they're still working age. Remember Derby winning the league too. Yeah, and in the '60s as well. They also won in the '60s. They've won the league twice. It will be really worrying if Derby were to go bust. Um, it shouldn't be allowed. Mel Morris has mismanaged that club diabolically. Um, but it's been allowed because the fit and proper persons test has allowed it to happen. The EFL, the FA, and the Premier League have allowed these situations to occur. Uh, so, you know, Well, I'm not a complete expert on how the fit and proper persons test works and the director's test works. Um, you know, it's the same with Wickham arguing about who stayed up. Is it Derby staying up and Wickham getting relegated when all this was breaking at the end of last season? So Wickham's chairman is trying to, was arguing over legal challenges. It's more bluster from owners. Wickham weren't good enough on the field. But if the administration and the points deductions were to be properly enforced, two-thirds of the championship would actually have points deductions, and the EFL can't have that. They've got to make a scapegoat out of someone. They've chosen Derby and Reading to be the clubs getting points deductions this season. But if we're going by the proper, 135% rule, two-thirds of the clubs in English football would have points deductions, including Premier League clubs, and we can't have that. We can't have everyone getting punished. We have to make examples of a handful of clubs. I think the way the Bury situation was handled, but Bolton was handled differently when they were in the same division, um, speaks volumes about the fact that Bolton were having parachute payments and were a Premier League club, whereas Bury were a lower league club for the majority of their existence, I think all their existence. And it speaks volumes about, where the clubs were at historically. Um, and it would seem to be one rule for one club, one rule for another. That can't be the case. Cannot be the case. And Bolton somehow have survived. God knows how. Derby up to this point have survived. I don't know how that's going to get resolved. They are still facing liquidation. They still have a transfer embargo. They're probably going to have to sell a player or two just to pay bills. Juventus, there's nothing further at the moment that is worth reporting. We know that there's an investigation into them. It's a serious investigation, and the fact that it's a independent trade body, that's the competition watchdog, which deals with all Italian industry, which is an independent body separate from the Italian Football League. Yeah, they're in serious trouble. The history of Juventus as well, with their previous corruption scandals, doesn't look good either. So that counts against them. And the Italian government are desperately trying to crack down on corruption and accounting corruption and tax avoidance and evasion and money laundering. And so they've got very strong laws in that regard. Their tax system and their tax laws and their anti-money laundering laws are far stricter than ours. So when you have an independent regulatory watchdog which is government backed, investigating them, they are in trouble, lots of trouble, and you know that speaks volumes of the situation that Juventus are in. It does. If they get kicked out of Serie A and thrown out, that speaks volumes for the situation that they're in, and we shall see what happens at this current time. I have an annoying little spot. Wow, but that in itself speaks volumes of the current situation. What else can you say? It sums up the greed within the game. Money has ruined the game. I think while having better revenue streams is good, I think we've gone a step too far. There's too much money floating around. Not enough of it is making it to the lower levels. The TV deals are skewed. Again, changing kickoff times for TV has left domestic fans quite irate, and you know, what else can you say really? And then we've got the issues with the COVID pandemic and disagreement between the leagues, the clubs, and the players, and no real plan. The Premier League, the EFL, and the FA haven't discussed how they're going to get these games played. They haven't discussed how they're going to fit them into the schedule. You know, and that is a concern. And you know, with no definite outcome and no plan and no contingency plans in place, what will happen? Until it happens to a club in the at the top, it happened to Portsmouth, and nothing was done then. And Portsmouth were FA Cup champions 2 seasons before they tumbled out the leagues. Nothing was done about Portsmouth. So what can you say? They had won silverware recently at the time, and it did go to court. The financial dealings went to court, and eventually got thrown out of court to do with the missing money. But yeah, Portsmouth, it happened. Uh, they appealed. They appealed. They got money to throw at the problem and make the problem go away. Um, what I find interesting is the ownership of Man City aren't overly fond of UEFA because of UEFA investigations into their sponsorship deals with the Etihad Airways, which is owned by the brother of the owner, and disclosing third-party payments and the fit of proper persons and financial fair play and all that. If Man City were a standalone club, they've gone bust. Same with Man United. Same with Chelsea. Massive overspend. I mean, look at the European Super League. The clubs, how much losses and profits they make. These owners don't care because they've got deep pockets and they can use it as a tax write-off against their other businesses because of tax law. And a lot of them are overseas owners as well, or based overseas, even if they're British owners. So it doesn't bother them. Their overseas assets, they will be paying tax in their home jurisdiction, and so therefore they can class that as an overseas write-off, untaxable income because it's overseas. It was actually Rennes, and Tottenham are out of the Conference League because they can't replay that game. UEFA have stated they're out, so Tottenham are out of Europe. Tottenham are out of Europe. They can't get that game against Rennes played because it affects the French league as well, and yeah, they're out of Europe. No, the Super League would never get past. The English clubs saw very, very quickly the reaction of fans. It's called reading the room. The overseas owners didn't give a toss. And when Chelsea pulled out, the whole deck of cards fell very, very quickly. And Tottenham were the last English club to realise they had misjudged the situation. Daniel Levy's come out with a few statements saying, "We're very, very sorry." And yeah, look what they are. They're on their third manager this year. Technically fourth if you count the interim manager. So third full-time managerial appointment in the year. You count Mourinho sacking Nuno Espirito Santo and now Conte. I don't know on that. I think Rennes have been given a 3-0 win. So I think Rennes have gone through. Vitesse Arnhem haven't. So that's where that situation stands. I believe Rennes have gone through because they were given a 3-0 win because of Tottenham unable to fulfil the fixture. This is what I don't understand. If they're going to have all this fixture congestion, just give the side that has got enough players that's not been able to play the win. If both sides have not got enough players, give it as a tie because neither side has been able to take the field. You just automatically get rid of that fixture congestion. Yes, it will affect the outcome of the league, but it's the only way to make sure at the end of the day the season gets completed. Yeah, Rennes have gone through. Tottenham are out. I think Vitesse Arnhem would have been second and might have qualified. But I'm not really following the European football at this point. I'm not really following regular season football. The only competition I'm following is the FA Cup because it's fun. I think the situation has got to the point where now clubs have been unable to fulfil fixtures. And as we saw with Dover Athletic last year, they were deducted all their points. Lucky to be allowed to start this season in the conference on negative points. And we could see a situation, which I don't think we'll be allowed to have, but we could, where clubs are unable to fulfil their fixture list because they've got too many games outstanding. And they would have to play such a condensed schedule that it would be unfeasible to do so. We could get to that point. So unless you shut the whole league down and have a fire break in place, it's going to happen. But of course, they've decided to forgo the winter break this year because of the World Cup, and therefore this situation has been exacerbated. Plus, squad rules have also exacerbated the situation with no reserves. And that is on, the English FA, that is on the Premier League, that is on the Football League, coming up with these squad rules and reducing squad sizes and therefore reducing costs because the players are overpaid. So the whole thing is broken. It was just working out when the money bubble was going to burst, and I think it has. I personally think the money bubble in football has actually burst. We know the players are overpaid. We know that. I think a fair few players know that they're very privileged to get the paychecks that they get. Favourites in the lesser European competitions, I couldn't give a toss. Personally, that's my opinion. I really couldn't give a rat's ass about the European competitions until we actually get to the knockout stages proper. And when I say that, the last eight, the Conference League is not a competition that I think should be existing. I think bring back the Cup Winners' Cup. But UEFA have gone down this path. And, it adds extra fixture congestion to an already congested fixture list. If we're discussing player welfare, that's clearly not on UEFA's mind. So I think UEFA have definitely got the European club game skewed. Go back to straight knockouts back in the day. Home and away legs, that's it. You reduce fixture congestion massively. It also means, therefore, you can actually have more games on TV at any one time. And it actually would revalue the domestic competitions that clubs play. But, that's my view on UEFA and European club football. We've been going down this path since the 90s with the reformatting of the Champions League, the UEFA Cup, Europa League, the removal of the Cup Winners' Cup, the current format of European football, which is going to be reformatted again. Oh yeah, West Ham do have a very good chance of winning some silverware. So do Real Betis and Bayer Leverkusen, historical club. Betis are a historical club. They've all got silverware in their trophy cabinets. It's been a long time since they've been at the top table, winning silverware, competing for silverware. It would be good to see one of them get their name on a trophy, and they're not one of the big clubs. Yeah, but that's where the Cup Winners' Cup was a very good competition. You had some really random clubs in that who really value their domestic cup competitions, didn't necessarily win the league, but they chased the cup competition, got into Europe, and then you would see some real different players playing their style of football. And I think it actually helped grow the European game to a wider international audience. And it since its demise, it's devalued the domestic cup competition. So we're having the argument now about the falling attendance at the League Cup and the FA Cup, and that is something that needs to be discussed. COVID notwithstanding. But I'm old enough to remember the Cup Winners' Cup. I'm old enough to remember the old UEFA Cup and the old format of the Champions League. And you talk about clubs there that have won their domestic league trophies in my lifetime. Uh, Definitely Feyenoord and Roma. I remember them winning league trophies not that long ago in my lifetime. Obviously, it's been a while. So, you know, the fact that we're discussing clubs like Roma, Feyenoord playing in the third level of European club football tells you only how competitive domestic leagues are, which is good. But also, it tells you that you've devalued the cup competitions because you've given too many European places away to mediocre teams. Because Roma and Feyenoord are pretty mediocre when it comes to European standards at this current time in their domestic leagues, but they're being rewarded for being average by their league finishing position. Yes, because Lazio did the double that year. They won the league and they won the Italian Cup, so they were a good side back then. Lazio were a very good side 20 years ago, and they're just coming back to being a good side again. They've been mediocre for a long time, and suddenly they're back in the reckoning. They're back in the discussion in Italian football. But it does say that you know you can be an average club, not overly successful in recent years, and you can still make Europe. And that's the problem. You're rewarding it being mediocre. So uh, there is that debate, and clubs like Borussia Mönchengladbach, if they were playing they are playing in Europe now, but hypothetically, you look at Borussia Mönchengladbach in the 70s, they won the Cup Winners' Cup and the UEFA Cup multiple times. They were a very, very good side. They were a solid side. If they were to win the German Cup in the last 20 years, which they haven't, they wouldn't qualify for Europe necessarily. They would qualify for the Europa League, but they wouldn't get into a competition designed for the competition that they've just won to get a gateway. They would have to finish by league position, and they've been a mediocre side for 20 years. Uh, yeah, Leicester have had a slow start. However, they're on the edge of the European places. They're playing better now lately. They're warming up into their season, but they had a slow start to the season. But yeah, they won the FA Cup. So in theory, 23 years ago, they're in the Cup Winners' Cup by virtue of winning a domestic cup competition and taking a cup competition seriously. And they were still fighting for a European place right up to the last couple of weeks of the season. So they gave it their all in league and cup. But other teams like Portsmouth, for example, when they won the FA Cup, if that was a decade earlier, they finished well down the league, but they put their effort into winning a competition. Whereas now, qualifying for Europe, like a Tottenham, can have a very average season, not do anything in the domestic cups, and you qualify for Europe by a point. And you don't even qualify for the top competition or even the secondary, qualify for the third competition because you're that average. And Leicester, they drop out of the Europa League because they're average. They've not been successful in that. They drop down. You're rewarding failure. You should be out of Europe, in my opinion. You've been knocked out of Europe. You're done. And this is where the group stage is flawed because you still reward teams that suck. Teams can suck in the Champions League, drop down to the Europa League. Teams can suck in the Europa League, drop down to the Europa Conference. You are rewarding failure because there's too much money in the game. Go back to straight knockouts. Go back to the Cup Winners' Cup. You cannot reward failure then. When you lose, you lose. You're out. You're done. Ironically, it reduces fixture congestion because you get rid of those dead rubber group stage games, which are midweek. You know, neither side's qualifying for the next round. You know, they're mean mediocre. It means every game matters. Whereas in the Champions League and Europa League group stages, not every game matters because once you've got enough wins or enough points in the first batch of home or away fixtures in the first half of the group stage, you can work out if you're going through to the next round or not, if you're going into the Europa League or not. So therefore, you can sort of meander your way through the rest of the group stage, put out a weakened side, and it's not really, you know, the best football. And Sevilla have worked out how to win the Europa League a lot. Sevilla are a good side. It's not knock Sevilla. They are a very solid European side. They've got a lot of trophies to back it up. They're not a bad team. They're not. They've had some great players play for Sevilla. No denying that. They are a very, very good side. Very successful side. Not the most successful side, obviously, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico, but they're a very, very good side. Their trophy cabinet will tell you they're a very successful side. Ironically, less success than Athletic Bilbao and Levante in La Liga. However, in Europe, they are a very solid, successful, all-round team. They know how to win a European trophy consistently. Whereas teams like Tottenham claim they're part of this European Super League, they haven't won a trophy for 13 years. They haven't won the league since the 60s. So this European Super League, the arrogance of it, you know. Anyway. Barcelona back in the 90s didn't always play in the Champions League either. They were sometimes playing in the Cup Winners' Cup and or the old UEFA Cup. They weren't always at the top table. So it's only in the last 15 years that we got used to Barcelona winning all the time. It wasn't always the case. They went through a lean spell. They did go through a lean spell. Right. I'm going to call that a day because I've had a long day. I've been awake now since 3 o'clock. I've had quite a few beers and I don't normally drink and I'm feeling a little bit flaggy. Really appreciate all your questions and discussion, mostly about football. Happens. But there's other things, you know, that we've discussed, like the NHL shutdown, the Ashes. We've discussed that. I personally think, regardless of how the series ends, even if we win a test or two in there, I think Joe Root and the coaching staff and the selectors needs to be an overhaul. NHL provisionally back on the 29th. We shall see. It's currently postponed until the 28th. There's a shutdown there. And already games tomorrow in the Football League and Premier League are being postponed. So how many games get played over the festive period? What happens to those fixtures? How do they rearrange them? How will that impact the FA Cup and the rest of the League Cup knockout stages? You know, that is something to discuss. There's going to be more meetings with the PFA, the Premier League, and the Football League at some point. There has to be. There's certain rumblings that the PFA may go on strike. So all is not well in English football. So there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate all of you today. Merry Christmas to you all. I'm wearing my ugly Christmas jersey. I will be doing some videos tomorrow as well. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.